Hello all. This is Nancy Pinkerton with Socius, and Tammy Johnson will be handling the presentation today on what's new in GP 2013. I think we're going to wait a few more minutes to see if we can't get a couple more attendees. And if you'll just give us a few minutes, we'll get started. Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming today. Tammy indicated we may have a lot of information to cover. There may or may not be time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to either log your questions and we will respond after the webinar. If we do have time, she will answer some questions, but just please understand that we may run out of time. Thank you. Oops. Tammy?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a few minutes after 12. Do you think we should go ahead and get started?
Sure.
Sure. I want to make one note, just that everyone is on mute mode. So if we are able to open it up for Q&A at the end, and we can unmute you all and as the questions come up. But again, we may not have time for that.
And actually, the way that we should be handling the questions is this is a GoToWebinar, so it's hard to open it up. So what we'll ask you to do is in your GoToMeeting toolbar at the very bottom, you'll see a chat or questions box. just go ahead and type your message in there, and I will go ahead and if I feel like we have time, I'll stop and I'll ask Nancy to read those messages to me. If we don't have time, definitely write down our email addresses. Pretty easy, T. Johnson and Pinkerton, you know the rest. And email us, either one of us, with any questions that you might have as well. We have a lot to cover today, so with that, Nancy, should I go ahead and get started?
Please. Thank you, Tammy.
Okay, good. So what we're going to be covering today are the new functional changes, and again, in the interest of time, this isn't going to be everything, but the functional changes in these areas. So starting with the System Manager and the home page, you know, general ledger, payables, receivables, a little bit in electronic banking. There's a whole lot in fixed assets. We'll talk about inventory and purchase order and sales order as well. So this will include information not only about GP 2013, but also about the recently released GP 2013 Release 2. So I've got some of the information for the new features that were included with that as well. So these are the areas that we're going to cover for System Manager and Homepage. So notice on, I've got, you know, document attach, and then I'm going to show you the difference or what was enhanced for document attach in Release 2. And then some changes to Smart List, an addition to Smart List, and then some information on the web client. So I'm going to just jump into GP here, if I can. It will let me open it. There we go. So again, this is GP 2013. I do not have R2 yet, but this is GP 2013. Some of the changes that you'll see here are on the home screen. Now, in my home screen, I have it set up, and if I come up here to customize this page, I have the option of choosing a column layout. I choose 2-column, and I also choose to stack my columns to the right. So I have a lot more flexibility in how I lay this out. So in prior releases, we haven't been able to do anything. Once we have our components on the screen, they're kind of where they are. Well, I can move them around now. Just drag and drop. And if I want to, if I wanted to have maybe my quick links here go a little larger, I can just click on this maximize column, and you can see that it pushes, because I had my my settings to push everything to the right, to stack things to the right. It'll go ahead and push them off to the right there. And then I can just bring it back to the way it was. Actually, this was over here. But you can see I have a lot of flexibility in how I lay this out. As well, you'll see now that this is no longer called Metrics. This is called Business Analyzer. And it's the same functions that we see in the Business Analyzer desktop application as well. So I could, you know, come out here and view my report. In this case, I think it's a cash position report. And I can do the same sort of stuff that we've seen before, where I can drill in and look for information, look for exceptions, and even if I choose to, or if I'm licensed properly, drill back into GP as well. So, you know, click on the link and, for example, open a journal entry window. So I'm doing this all from right within GP at this point, instead of having to have that Business Analyzer desktop application. This is also available. I'm just going to come over here to my navigation pane here. This is also available in your navigation lists. So in my example, I've got maybe a collection view here of customers who have a balance of over $50,000. And there might be things that I want to do to these customers, maybe call them, maybe see their aging. So this is Business Analyzer embedded here in my navigation list. And so you can access them from here, and you can have multiple records apply to these metrics as well. So I've got 3 customers here, and you can see the aging status, for example, of those 3 customers is there. And the same capabilities here to view the report, filter it, all the things that I can do in Business Analyzer. All right, back to the home page here. I'm going to go into system preferences here for just a second because there's been a new setup option added to the system preferences window, and that's this protect docx attachments with a password. So this is when you're generating invoices or purchase orders or whatever it is you're generating and sending to your customers through Word. So if you're using the Word templates for invoices, for example, you can have the system automatically generate a password so that that document can't be changed when it gets attached to the email. Nobody knows the password, and that's okay because you don't ever want that document changed. You don't ever want anybody typing into that. As an alternative, you can actually choose to enter a password as well. But that prevents those Word documents from being changed once they've been emailed to your customers or vendors. You also have an additional option in Sales to send your packing slip and back order documents via email. So not just orders, invoices anymore. It's more of the sales order processing related documents. All right, so this next function, I'm just going to click on this GL trial balance report, and I'm going to print it out to the screen. And feel free to applaud to yourself when I actually do this thing where I push the print button, and it asks me which printer I want to send this particular report to. So GP now allows you to redirect your print to a printer at the time of printing. You don't have to select your printer first and then print your report. You can actually generate your report, and it'll ask you which printer you want to send it to. Kind of standard Windows functionality there. Kind of sticking with that reporting theme, and this kind of goes to Business Analyzer as well. I am going to bring up a vendor here, and there's a new option in the maintenance window, so customers, employees, items, vendors. So in my master records, to actually generate reports, I don't know why that popped back up, generate reports directly from this window, from my vendor maintenance window. I've got one assigned here. I'm just going to go to assign reports so you can see what it looks like. It looks very much like when we apply Business Analyzer on our home screen. So we're picking the ones that we want. I've chosen payables aging. I can have multiple reports here as well. I've just got one. But when I generate the report, then it's going to pull it out into a browser. Again, we're using those same Business Analyzer charts and key performance indicators, but they're specific to the record that I've chosen. So in this case, I'm looking at payables aging by vendor. And so again, I can have those on my maintenance windows. All right, a significant new change. Actually, let me bring up my vendor again here. I think I've got something here that I can show you. This is pretty significant. I now have this document attach capability in Dynamics GP. And again, this is for master files as well as purchase orders and sales orders. So I'm just going to click on this, and you can see by the paper here that there is something attached here. If there was nothing attached, it would be an empty paper clip. But here I've got an image, and I can preview the image. If I want to, I can have a PDF, a Word file. So if you've got contracts, on an inventory item, there might be specifications, drawings, whatever else you would need to include, you can just choose to attach those documents then onto that particular record. This has been enhanced pretty significantly in GP 2013 Release 2 in that we can now go into document attachment setup and actually describe. We can assign attributes, and these are just you decide what those are, so you can assign high-level attributes and then individual attributes on the document. Notice there is this flow option here, and so this will indicate whether the attachment, the individual attachment, will flow from the master record to the transaction. And so that's where you can see like item specs, things like that, where they can flow to a purchase order or to a sales order. As well, you have the option to indicate whether something will be included. You can see that in this example here, my attachment property here, it's showing that it is going to flow from the master record to the transaction. So here's that document attached. Here's an item card. And you can also indicate whether you're going to email that. For example, if you're emailing an order and we've got these item specifications that are attached to the inventory item that has now flowed to the sales order, do I want, when I email the documents to the customer, when I email the invoice, when I email the packing list, when I email the order confirmation, do I want to have that document attached as well? And there can be multiple attachments there. So some pretty significant changes to a brand new feature in GP 2013, just in the second release now. Additionally, there's been some changes to SmartList. This is a really good one here. In past releases, you all know that when you're looking at a SmartList, you can't get rid of this, this favorites pane here that shows all of your categories and your favorites that you've saved. You can't hide it so that you have more on the screen. GP 2013 Release 2 allows you to hide that favorites pane. So you can now see more of your results, more of your query results. So it's kind of like Outlook when you hide your navigation pane, same sort of thing. Just push the little arrow there, and when you want it to display again, you just push it back out. Also, hopefully you're aware that SmartList Builder is now going to be, it's been returned to its developer, which is E1, and so they now, it's not being OEM'd by Microsoft anymore, so E1, it will now be supporting and enhancing SmartList Builder and also selling it. But included in GP 2013 Release 2 is the new SmartList Designer. So there are differences, but you can see it's very kind of click, drag and drop type functionality where you say, I want this table, these fields, I want to create these relationships, these filters. One huge benefit of SmartList Designer is it allows you to make changes, and I would say copy and change the out-of-the-box SmartList. So in SmartList Builder, you didn't really have that option. There might be ways to kind of trick it around using Excel Report Builder and things like that to get it back to changing the original SmartList, but here you can actually go in and make changes and modify those original SmartLists. So that's the SmartList Designer. As well, in GP 2013, we had the addition of the web client. So, and initially, these 6 modules were rolled out. You know, the kind of the distribution, accounting and distribution focus. With Release 2, we're seeing, I don't really know of another module that, oh, actually, yeah, HR and payroll. So that I'm sure will be added next, but for now, we've got GLAR, AP, inventory, sales order, purchase order, come back here, fixed assets, field service, project accounting, and manufacturing. So for those of you who are not doing payroll or HR, you could be using the web client as opposed to installing the GP client on your workstations. All right, so let's move on to the general ledger here. These are the areas that we're going to cover. And so I'm just going to get to it here. All right, let me fold up my system here and unfold General Ledger. So for those of you using unit accounts, you might be keeping track of annual statistic information. You know, number of visits per month, or something like that, number of documents generated, or I'm just making it up. And in the past, you had to prior to GP 2013, you had to at the end of the year zero out those unit accounts manually. Well, now you have an option on your unit account maintenance window to check this box to clear the balance during year-end close. So that can save you some time if you're collecting annual information, statistical information that you want to reset at the beginning of the year. There's also been some changes to the way that GP handles inactive accounts at year-end. And there's a checkbox here to maintain inactive accounts. And with an option, all inactive accounts are only those with budget amounts. So if you've got accounts that you haven't used this year, but you've already got your budgets going into the next year, and you are using those accounts, if you choose to maintain inactive accounts with budget amounts, anything else that doesn't have a budget that's inactive will go ahead and be cleared out of there for you. So some additional options around that. There's also, you'll see right here, hopefully you can see it through GoToMeeting, there's a progress bar now, a status bar, to tell you the status of your year-end closing routine. I know sometimes users think that the system has locked up and they boot out of a year-end close only to find out that that's probably not what you should have done. It was still processing. Now it's actually going to tell us that it's processing. It's going to show us on the screen that it is, in fact, still working. All right. So in GP, and this has been here for a long time, you have the ability on most of the batches in GP, you have the option to require batch approval. In my example here, I'm requiring batch approval on my journal entry batches in my general ledger. And so my approval password is access. So in order to generate a batch, to post a batch, someone has to come in here and check this and enter the password. So it's a basic approval process. In prior releases, once you do that, it doesn't go anywhere with the transaction. You can't see it on the transaction. Now you can. So in GP 2013, and I actually used SmartList Builder to do this, but you could use SmartList Designer as well. You can see now the approval date and the approval user ID accompanies that entry. So it stays with that entry. So you can see you have an audit trail of who approved it and when they approved it. And that's true for most of the batches in the system. You have the option to include that approval process. We saw, I think in GP 10, we saw the addition of the reconcile to GL processes. And so those were available for receivables and payables. And in GP 2013, that's expanded to include inventory. So it will help you reconcile your inventory to your general ledger, as well as bank reconciliation. So you can reconcile bank rec to your GL. And it's just looking at the transactions and helping you match those up so that you don't have to pull out your 4 colors of highlighter and your ruler and your Sharpie to get everything reconciled. The last thing I'm going to mention, I don't really have anything to show you on this. I'll just tell you. But you can now, in GP 2013 Release 2, reconcile bank accounts with no activity. So I know that in some cases, auditors require you to prove that you reconciled the bank account even though it doesn't have any activity in it. In the past, GP hasn't allowed us to do that. With Release 2 of GP 2013, we can now, even if there's no activity, the difference is going to be 0. You can push that reconcile button and historically show that it was reconciled. All right, so let's move on here to payables. There's quite a few changes here, or additions. So the first one I'm going to talk about today is the ability to change the remit to address of a transaction after it's been posted. So this edit payables transactions has been around for a while, and it generally allowed you to, oops, I picked the wrong vendor. It allowed you to change due dates, discount dates, that sort of thing. Well, in GP 2013, you now have the ability, if I can find one that will allow me to do it here, you have the ability to change that remit to ID. And where that can be important is in situations where you need to send a check to a different address. Because remember, GP will print, if it's got 2 transactions with 2 different remit to addresses, it will print 2 checks. It also could be important if a vendor decides that they want to allow you to pay them electronically because the EFT bank information is assigned to that address ID. So again, you can edit that now in Edit Payables transactions. You can change the remit to ID. There's also been pretty significant enhancement in maintaining 1099 information. You know, we've gone from just being able to say what kind of a form it is to now being able to say the form in the box. Now we can actually, if we've, which I know this never happens, but sometimes you forget to tag a vendor as being 1099able, and you're kind of stuck with, you know, recording that information manually and then letting it go forward. Well, now you can update the vendor and the vendor transaction. So I could say, I just checked vendor and 1099 transactions. So maybe I had not a 1099 vendor. I want to change it to a particular vendor to miscellaneous non-employee compensation. I can pick the vendor, and when I click process, it'll update the vendor card with the tax type and box, and then all of the transactions for that vendor will be updated as well, so that I don't have to go in and add them up manually and drop them in the summary screen. All right, we can also now reprint our remittance forms for our vendors. So if a vendor doesn't have a remittance for a particular check that you sent them, or you know, you want to send them a copy of the remittance, you can just choose the payment. So here's my check number 20100. When I drill back, I can see the check. There's a new button, Recreate Check Stub. I'm just going to drop this out to my screen, and there we go. So it shows me all the details of what I paid that vendor. This can be done through a Word template as well. And then from here, I could even send this directly to the vendor if I wanted to. I could just email it to them instead of printing it. So that can be really helpful for the payables folks. As well, there's been a nice enhancement to voiding transactions, and that is around reconciliation. Let me see if I can find one here. There we go. So you can see here in this reconciled box, it says no. If there's something that has been reconciled and I try to void it, it's going to give me a message. It's not going to stop me, but it's going to give me a message, and so at least it's warning you of what you're about to do. Generally, you probably don't want to void a reconciled transaction, but you may want to, and so it's giving you a message and giving you a warning about that. Additionally, kind of continuing on the void theme, if you void a check with a credit memo applied to an invoice, when you void that check, it'll unapply the credit. So and so if you need to then reissue the credit and reapply it, then you can do that. But it untangles everything, whereas before it didn't untangle it well. All right, so a couple of things in GP 2013 Release 2. We're starting to see some of the functions of the Professional Services Tools Library flow into mainstream GP. And the first one I'm going to mention here is the vendor modifier and combiner. So it's become more useful. We don't have to open Professional Services Tools Library in order to use it. It's got a much better interface. You can see here's the combiner. So we're combining ACE Travel into Advanced Office, and so all the transactions and history for ACE Travel will move to Advanced Office. Here on the modifier, we're changing the ACE Travel vendor ID to a new vendor ID. So this is now built in. You don't have, it's not an extra download. It's just part of GP 2013 Release 2. There's also a streamlined void process. And you'll notice here, you don't have, in prior releases, you don't have a lot of filtering capabilities, whereas in the new interface you do. You still have the reconciled option here, but it's just, it's easier to find things that you want to void. Whereas before it can be a struggle if you don't know exactly the vendor, exactly the document number. All right, so I'm going to move into receivables now. And let's go back to GP here. And I'm going to open up the AR. So in receivables, we can now come in here. There we go. We can have, both in the customer address and in the customer master, we can now have labels for our user-defined fields. So we've always had that in the customer master, or we have for quite a while, but not in the customer address. So now we can label these and say, I don't know, group or whatever it is you want to call it. And then when you look at a customer in the address, instead of saying user-defined one, it'll say group, or whatever it is that you want to apply to that particular window. This next one's a real big one. For those of you who use multi-currency, you know that if you have a multi-currency cash receipt, you had to post it and then go into Apply Documents as a separate step to apply that cash receipt. Now, in GP 2013, you just enter it normally. Go ahead and apply it to whatever you want. And you can see this is going to leave me a little bit of an amount open on the account. Huge enhancement for those of you who do multi-currency transactions. Makes it a lot easier to record your cash receipts. All right, so let's go back here to the deck. Speaking of cash receipts, in GP 2013 Release 2, there's been a very simple but I think pretty functional enhancement when you're inquiring and drilling back on a cash receipt. It actually shows you the checkbook where that receipt was recorded. So that can be helpful when you're trying to research, research transactions. As well, as we saw with the vendor combiner, we can also see with the customer combiner that same sort of process that we saw with the vendors. And so this is just in the customers. Again, this came out of this was born in the Professional Services Tools Library and is now just a part of Core GP. All right, electronic banking, a couple of good enhancements here. I'm just going to open up my folder here. So the first one is the use of a BAI format. That's what most banks use. And so they've created a baseline format here that then you can go ahead and change if you want. As well, I'm just going to bring up a format that I already have. There we go. So this is an electronic, not electronic reconcile. This is EFT. There's a couple of changes here in your EFT file formats. First of all, you had, in prior releases, you had a start and an end, but you didn't have a field length. Now you can put in a field length, and it'll do the start and end for you. So it makes it a little bit easier to manage your formats. As well, I'm going to come down here to the bottom. If your bank requires that you include a settlement date on your transactions, you can include that as well, and it'll prompt you when you do the transmission of your file to enter the settlement date. Usually the day after you transmit the file. All right, so that's electronic banking. Fixed assets, I think, got the most attention in GP 2013. These are just a few of the enhancements. There are pages of enhancements that have been made. And if you're not using fixed assets and there was a particular reason why you weren't using it, you might want to readdress that because they really paid attention to fixed assets in this release. So let's look at a few of these things. So let's start here. Historical depreciation reports. So I'm going to come here to my depreciation ledger, and I'm going to do a modify here. And you can see that when I generate this report, I'm doing it as of 12/31/2016. My demo date is all for 12/2017. So I'm going back in time to a prior year. When I generate my report, just make this bigger here, you can see that it's doing the historical information as opposed to the current information. And this is true for all the depreciation reports. You will see this depreciation as of option for all of your reports. So you can get historical depreciation. In my depreciation process routine itself, I can actually reverse depreciation now. So if I've done something and I want to flip it back to where I was when I started, I can actually do a reversal of a depreciation that I've already done. We're seeing greater function in the post to GL process as well. So before, when you said post this to the GL, it created the journal entry. There was no ability to really see what's going to be posted prior to actually processing and posting that over into the general ledger. So with GP 2013, I can now review these transactions prior to posting them. And I can, look back at my source document, review information about the transaction. So this happened as a result of, it was a depreciation expense transaction during my depreciation process. You can't change them, but if there's a problem that maybe you need to reverse your depreciation, make a change, and then redo your depreciation, you can go ahead and do those functions before you actually send those transactions to the general ledger. Also, for those of you who have multiple companies and move assets around through the different companies, you can actually use the intercompany transfer to move assets from the current company. So this is from Fabricam, and I'm moving this to USD. Now I don't have fixed assets set up in USD, so it's not going to allow me to go much further than this. But you can see all the options that you have for transfer. It will retire the asset in the source company and then go ahead and do the transfer or even a partial transfer in the destination company with the appropriate costs moving there as well. And finally, the last thing I want to focus on for fixed assets is you can now have automatic asset IDs. I really like this because it's really the asset label that's going to tie to the label that's on your, that's physically on your asset. So the asset ID becomes just an internal number, like a journal entry number or something like that. You'll also notice that the purchases now, it's a drop-down. You could still do it the old way, but it's a drop-down. And so, adding a new asset's pretty simple. if you're using the purchasing process and using the automatic asset ID generation. All right, so that's part of fixed assets. I think we probably did a webinar on a few months ago just on fixed assets in GP 2013. So you might want to look for the recording of that if you're interested in knowing more. So let's move on to inventory. Some real good changes here. In inventory, I'm going to bring up an item transaction. Actually, let's do this. I'm just going to enter one. We'll call this batch GP 2013. I know this is a serial numbered item here. So the first thing is I can enter a reason code. And actually, I'm going to change this. I want to make sure I'm sending this to the right place. A reason code, and I'm just going to drill back on this so you can see an example. So I can tag my inventory transactions, movement transactions, transfers, bin transfers, any sort of adjustments with a tag that tells me why I did it. Travels with the transaction. You can also override the offset account. So if you need to have it go to cost of sales or a scrap account or something like that, you could go ahead and set that up as part of the reason code. So I'm going to go here and let's go, let's do a -1 here. I know I have one here. And when I'm looking at my serial and lot transactions, if I have multiple transactions, I can actually do a multi-select here. So I can choose multiple transactions in order to apply those. Like the control and the shift-click functions work as well. So I can do multiple serial numbers at the same time if I need to, and lot numbers. And so we talked about reason codes. I can also inactivate inventory items. And so that just prevents me from doing transactions for that item. I can also, following that same process, I can inactivate item site combinations. So if you had water damage in your warehouse and there's a whole section of the warehouse that has where the inventory is unusable, you could just make that item and that site inactive until you decide what you're going to do with it. And that way it's not going to be available for sale. You can't, it won't allocate, it won't do anything. We can't sell out of that location. And the last thing in inventory is bin transfer history, and this is a big one. I know that we've been looking for a long time. So you'll see the addition in the bin transfer entry of this document number. So it's an auditable, historical transaction, just like a journal entry or an item transaction that you would enter. It's got a document number associated with it. So here you can see I'm moving one from my transfer bin into my auto create bin. And if I look at bin transfer inquiry, I can actually see that that happened. So that's a big one for those of you who are using bins inside of Dynamics GP. All right, let's move on to purchase order here. And we can look at a few of the enhancements for GP 2013 in the area of purchase order. The first is when you are processing a purchase order, and let's just pick one here. Let me see here. That's probably not a good one. So if you've got a purchase order where you've received part of the inventory but not invoiced it, it will tell you. It will tell you when, and I'm trying to find one. I thought I had one here. It'll give you a message that says this hasn't been fully invoiced. So let's try this one. So if I try to, that's a new one. That's probably not going to work. No, I don't want to make those changes. So let's see here. Yeah, that's still new as well. I thought I had one sitting here that I probably processed it. All right, so here's one that hasn't been invoiced. It should tell me, if I click the right buttons here, it should tell me that it hasn't been fully invoiced. There we go. One or more line items have a remaining quantity to invoice. It'll still let you close it, but it's warning you that you know, you need to pay attention to this, and maybe since you've received it and not invoiced it yet, you might want to do some more research before you choose to close the purchase order. So that's what that function is for. This next one is pretty big for those of you who process drop ship purchase orders and have serial numbered items. So in my example here, I have a purchase order that was generated from a sales order. It's actually linked to sales order 2244. When I receive this in, it is going to allow me to pick the serial numbers, and then when I look back at the sales transaction, those serial numbers will be automatically applied. So no more setting up a fake warehouse, receiving it in, applying the serial numbers. You can do a true drop ship, and then it will include those lot and serial numbers for you automatically when you record them with the transaction. So you don't have to worry about doing those separate steps any longer. There's also been some changes in purchasing in the way that you can handle non-inventory items, tolerances over and short for quantities when you're generating purchase orders. So this is new right here, the quantity tolerance. And if we look at a PO here, we'll look at this guy here, and if I go in to receive the PO items, and it could be a receive an invoice. Remember my tolerance was 10%. Well, if I say 15, it will not allow me to process the transaction because it's above my tolerance. And the same would apply on so an overage, the same would apply on a shortage with a quantity tolerance. So that's for non-inventory items. That also exists for inventory items. Just to let you know here, in the purchasing options, you can set those tolerances in your purchasing options as well for inventory items. And the same rules apply. All right. Oh, here's a good one. For those of you who are processing prepayments on purchase orders, thought I had one sitting here. You can actually come in and on any purchase order, you can process a prepayment. And you can see it's got a little hash there telling me the payment hasn't been processed yet. This is the information that's going to use to process that prepayment. And then if I go into, we'll just go into batches here. And I think I've got one set up for PO prepayments. If I look at transactions, and I'm going to go to the edit check batch view, I can see I've got one already going here for Ace Travel, and then here's that $1,000 for Carlton Specialty. So not only can you trigger the payment, but it really facilitates your separation of duties because the person who's generating the purchase order really shouldn't be the same person that's generating the prepayment. So payables can go ahead and generate the check and give it to the person who's generating the purchase order, attach it to the purchase order, and send it off to the vendor. All right. So that was purchase order. Not huge enhancements to sales order, but there have been some. And the one I think that is the most significant is in the area of ship-to addresses. In the past, when we've looked at ship-to addresses in GP, we haven't had a name for those ship-to addresses. So if you're overwriting an address here, and maybe I want to send it somewhere else, we're going to send this to Tammy's house. Now, it's not going to Aaron Fitz Electrical. It's going to Tammy's house, to Tammy's attention. And so that way, if it's a different company or it has to say something different for this shipment on that line, you can go ahead and enter it in there without having to set up a whole new address. All right. Well, it looks like we have, I don't know, about 12 minutes. Nancy, do we have any questions?
I'm sorry, Tammy. Yes, I do. I've got about a dozen.
All right, let's see if we can get through some of them.
Okay, is Business Analyzer a new license in 2013?
Is it a new license? No.
Okay. Was it okay? Can you set security with document attached to vendors? Can you set the security when you're attaching that document for vendors?
So that it's going to be whoever has access to the location of that document is going to be able to attach the document to the vendor. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, okay. Does it store attachments in the database or in a folder?
It's pulling them into the database at this point.
Okay. On the attached doc option, with flow selected, does the file attached get duplicated to the sales order, or is it just a point of reference from master record?
It's a flow. So yeah, it ends up being associated with the transaction. It doesn't move. It is replicated. It's my understanding that it's replicated there. So it's going to flow over there.
Okay. Okay. And then in the Smart List Designer, can you connect to databases outside of the GP data? No. Yeah, I didn't think so. There are some products out there that do that, but
yeah, Smart List Builder. I mean that, and so in looking at Smart List Designer, I haven't had my hands on it yet, but I've poked around in some screenshots and things like that. It's going to work for most of you, but those of you who have those enhanced requirements, you need to connect to external databases. You have ISV products that you need to use for use in Smart List that maybe they don't offer it out of the box. You will still need Smart List Builder.
So that's good to know. Okay, advantages and disadvantages of web client R2 version versus desktop version.
I think there's a couple of things to think about, and this is not a limited list. There are probably more than the things I'm going to tell you right now. It's what's the strategy in your organization? Do you want to go to a more browser-based environment? It could reduce your IT costs just because you don't have to install the client. You route them to instead of installing something, you route them to a browser. It's just you give them a browser address, and that's how your users access GP. So I think it's more of an organizational decision that this is where we're moving, and so we want to as an organization, we want things to be using finger quotes web-based. So this is why we're going to use that. And if you have remote locations, and I mean there are a lot of other reasons as well, but there's some things to think about there.
Okay. Can you unapply credits so they do not automatically apply to a payable?
That's not anything that's changed. So it's the way it was in GP1.
Oh, okay.
That hasn't changed. So no, that's not going to there's no enhancement to change that.
Okay. Can you unapply credits? I want to make sure I repeat that. Can you unapply credits?
No, I understand. Okay. I understand the question.
Okay. Sorry. Well, I wasn't sure I read it correctly.
Yep.
ESP, will it create the CTX file type? C as in cat, T as in Tom, X?
It might. I don't know. You can create your own formats, and so that may be something that that you might want to investigate with your consultant. We may have even done it before.
Okay, is reverse depreciation creating transactions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it's auditable. It's creating transactions. Nothing happens, with the exception of bin transfers, which now has a historical component. Anything that you put through GP is gonna have a transactional impact.
Well, it said, or is it actually voiding, removing those depreciation transactions?
It's reversing them and putting them and recreating them.
Okay. And then this could be the last one before you think we're out of time. Is there an item combiner in 2013, like vendor and customer combiner?
There isn't yet. I believe that's part of the professional services tools library. So, you know, whether it's, first of all, you should have the professional services tools library. Every single one of you should have it. It's free. I hate that. It's part of your license. You should have the professional services tools library. Prior to GP 2013 R2, vendor combiner, customer combiner, modifier and combiner, item modifier and combiner, fixed asset modifier and combiner, plus a lot of other stuff, payroll stuff, and just a lot of tools that you can use inside of GP. So whether it's there in GP 2013 R2 or not, you have access to it through the Professional Services Tools Library. So if you don't have that, definitely talk to your account manager or your consultant and find out how you can, what you need to do to get it. It is a separate download.
Okay. And there's several others, but they really relate to specific to QuickTag, and then the image and the attached document functionality. And I think those are going to require a little more research, Tammy. Can delete all documents and attach. Here's one. If you got another, can document attach management can delete old documents and attach new documents, or keep both old and new documents?
It keeps what you attach.
Yeah, okay.
So there's no automation built around this. It's not full document management. It's not going to replace PaperSave, QuickTag, any of those types of solutions. It is to attach documents and facilitate the flow of those documents through to the purchase order and sales order transactions. I wish I hope that they include it soon for payables transactions, because that, I think, is one area where we could see some significant gains in productivity just by being able to scan those invoices in, attach them to your payables transactions, and then shred the invoice because it's already there.
Yeah. Okay. And gosh, there's some, let's see, I think that may be about it. Like I said, there's some on image document in relationship to QuickTag, but I definitely think it says can document attachment, one of them, document management, would it conflict with QuickTag? I don't see why.
It's different than QuickTag.
Yeah.
It's completely different. You're talking about simply attaching a document versus document management. So they're real different.
Okay.
You're not going to have the workflow options and things like that. So it won't conflict, but I don't know what you would gain by using both. You're going to have more with the document management solution.
Okay. The last question is, what about project accounting and field service? And I wonder if she's asking in particular if there were changes to it. I'm not sure I really understand her question.
Yeah, I don't understand the question either. Definitely, whoever submitted that, shoot me off an email if you want me to follow up with you. I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, I think that's about it, Tammy. Thank you so much.
I think we have Our upcoming webinars, I have to do the commercial for the upcoming webinars, totally forgot. On November 20th, you'll have your year-end closing procedures for payroll. So those of you on payroll, be sure to go and register for that on our website. And on December 5th, I think Jeff Smith is doing the GP year-end webinar. So that's something that everyone will want to attend as well. Again, you can register at our website. And if you also want to look at promotions that Microsoft is offering, you can follow the link to that website as well, or that page on our website, and it'll show you the different promotions that are being offered by Microsoft.
Yeah, and as the licensing has changed, Tammy, in 2013, and if people have questions, if they'll reach out to their account managers, they can clarify a lot of those licensing questions.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
no more questions?
Let me double check our queue. Yeah, her question was any enhancements on project accounting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, nothing significant. Again, if you want to send me an email, I can get you the what's new for those areas. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you're interested in learning more, definitely reach out to your account manager and get on the upgrade calendar.
Yeah, this year is almost at an end.
Yep.
Okay, thanks again. Thanks, Tammy. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.